today for this webcast presented by the ACG Future Corporate Leaders Board, or FCL for short. An introduction to robotic process automation, or as you hear as it referred to, RPA many times this morning and this afternoon. I'm Patrick Hearns. I'm an audit shareholder with Schneider, and I am the ACG Pittsburgh FCL Future Corporate Leaders Board. First, I would like to thank ACG Pittsburgh, the ACG Pittsburgh annual sponsors. We would not be here today without their generosity, especially during this difficult year. We are very grateful. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, please let me know, or please reach out to Micah Whitfield. To thank all of our sponsors for their support, a newer benefit of their sponsorship is that anyone from your firm or your company receives complimentary virtual program access to all regular events. There is also a free membership for an individual under the age of 40 that comes with your sponsorship. Before we start the program, I would just like to remind everybody, if you have somebody that you would like to nominate to be featured for the ACG FCL Spotlight, the link to the nomination form will be emailed to you following this program today. Now, moving on to today's events. It's my pleasure to introduce Patrick Armknect, a shareholder of Technology Advisory Services at Schneider with me, and Adam Costa, an RPA solution architect with the Technology Advisory Practice at Schneider. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick and to Adam to introduce themselves.
Great. Well, thank you, Patrick. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Hopefully everyone now can see my screen. By way of introduction, my name is Patrick Armknect. I am a shareholder in the Technology Advisors Group at Schneider. A little bit of background information. I'm a CPA. Started my career in the audit practice, but focused on technology even within the audit practice. Also a certified information technology professional. I'm a member of ISACA. And I have 27 years of experience within public accounting and consulting industry, primarily focused 20 plus within the technology realm. Adam Costa is my co-presenter today, and we'll be handing off the presentation to Adam after I kind of go through an introduction to RPA. Adam's going to speak to some of the use cases. As far as questions and answers, just for the sake of time, we encourage you to use the question and answer functionality within Zoom to ask any questions. We will try to address the questions towards the end of the presentation, just to make sure that we get through the content. But we do encourage questions and encourage you to use that functionality. So RPA, what is RPA? You're going to hear me today use the term RPA, as Patrick mentioned. You're going to hear me use the term robotic process automation, and more often than not, you're going to hear me use the term bots. Just to be clear, robotic process automation is the technology. Bots are the technology in use. The automation of a process is typically referred to as a bot. So I want to be clear about what RPA is and what it isn't. First off, RPA is software. I know there's some misconceptions out there when people think of bots. They think of machine bots, and those are certainly a type of robot, but RPA in and of itself is a software application. What's important to know about RPA works with your existing infrastructure. So what I mean by that is it works with your existing systems. It can do things like log into your ERP application or CRM application. It can go onto a website and provide credentials. It can log into a banking website and download information. There are some exceptions, and we'll talk about those a little bit later in my presentation. But I think the important thing to note is RPA is meant to work with the applications that you're already working with. So RPA simulates an employee. And what I mean by that is RPA tools are meant to be taught how to do something. They do things in a specific order of operation, but they're not meant to think. They don't use reason. They don't use judgment. They don't have emotions. And I say that only because I think it's important to note when we talk about RPA without artificial intelligence or without machine learning capabilities, which are can be used in conjunction with RPA to do more robust things. But RPA in and of itself is meant to do process tactical solutions and do it in an order of operations. So what does RPA do? I think first we got to talk about bots can collaborate with humans, right? We call that attended automation. This is where a bot is processing portions of the work and a human is processing the other. So that attended automation could be a handoff from the bot to the human or vice versa, from the human to the bot. Unattended automation or unattended bots, these are things that complete tasks without human intervention. So as by the nature of what I do, and I'm often talking to folks in the finance realm, one of the examples I'll use, and I'll use it a couple times today, is the bank reconciliation, right? I think everyone who's been in an accounting department at some point has probably had to do a bank reconciliation process. When we talk about a bank reconciliation process, that's the type of automation that could be done unattended, right? I want to be clear here. Sometimes the bot does not produce, sometimes the purpose of a bot is not to complete something to 100%, but rather to identify the exceptions. So when we think about something like a bank reconciliation process, right? We know that we're going to take information from our financial system. We're going to match that information up to our bank statement and identify any of the variances. In the cases, in a number of cases where we've helped companies automate their bank reconciliation process, the final deliverable is, in fact, here's the exceptions. Here's the things that need to be researched that we can't necessarily build into the bot because we don't know why they're exceptions at this point in time. As we identify those things and what causes those exceptions, we can build that logic into the bot technology. But the point I want to make about unattended automation is, it's something that can run on its own without human intervention. So a bank rec is something like that, provided that the intended output is to identify the exceptions. The other thing I think that's important to note about RPA technology is rule-based decisions, right? I already mentioned this, but rule-based decisions allow bots to determine how to complete tasks. So that's what I was speaking about when we talk about an order of operations. How do we do things? This is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3 in the process. When you build bot technology without artificial intelligence or machine learning, that's kind of how you have to do it. You have to lay out the order of operations. These RPA technologies, they use GUIs, the user interfaces, right? I kind of mentioned this, they use it the same way humans do. So bots can log into your ERP system with their own credentials. Bots can log into, any type of website where you might have to supply credentials, provided that you provide those bots credentials as well. You also have to train those bots, and when I say train, that's really a development activity of what they're looking to do, what their intended purpose is within that website or that financial application. And then finally, bots, where we're really seeing the impact of these bots is, or this technology right now, is that they have the ability to automate applications and interfaces that had no way of being automated before, right? There was no API available. There was no integration between 2 different vendors to support a particular interface. Bots have the ability to do that without your reliance on those vendors to enable that. So one of the things I think, as you're evaluating bot technology, or as companies are evaluating bot technology, one of the most compelling reasons to do this, and I'll speak to the benefits as well as some detriments of bot technology as well. But one of the most compelling reasons to do this is that this technology makes our different systems and different applications work together, right? I think on average, I think we all have this vision of, hey, we're going to have one solution that does everything, right? And there's some vendors out there that promise, yes, we have this one solution that does anything. The reality is there's probably in any business that we go into, there's probably a minimum of 14 to 15 systems that the business is dependent on. And I think that's on the low end. The larger you scale, I think the number of systems would actually go up. But really a compelling reason to use bot technology or RPA technology is the ability to leverage integration between these systems, reduce duplication of effort, and in some cases automate tasks completely, right? And we'll talk about what types of tasks those would be. So why is this a hot topic now? The reality is this technology has been around for a long time. right? It's not a new technology. It started in kind of the bigger companies with higher volumes of transactions. So originally, if you think about where it was deployed most frequently, it was in the banking industry where they're dealing with high volume transactions. It was in healthcare where they were dealing with a number of records. But I think the important thing to note as you explore your digital transformation journey, or your companies explore their digital transformation journey, is this technology has improved. They've made it easier to use, easier to develop in, as well as the cost has come down, right? These technologies scale much better than they used to, and they're much more affordable. So things that used to be in the large companies are certainly hitting the mid market, we'll call it, as well as small market. Personally, I have a nonprofit client that runs on a budget of about $7 million a year that's invested in this technology and has used it to automate a number of processes, right? We also have, Fortune 50 companies that have been using this for a number of years as well. So just to talk about the scale from a company perspective, I think it can scale from very small to very large, as long as the use cases justify it. The other thing, kind of as why now, I think over the last year, if we've learned anything, right, it's we need to find new ways to do business. COVID has taught us the physical methods, anything that we used to do that was primarily paper driven, or was passing paper back and forth, or document driven back and forth. It's become more difficult. I don't want to imply that there's not technologies out there that help with that, but RPA is also one of those technologies, right? Where we can take things that used to be physical methods of shifting work and make it digital methods. And as we're talking about that, I think our folks have already started, and I know digital transformation, I consider it somewhat of a buzzword. What is digital transformation? But it's the thought of digitizing processes so that you're less reliant on paper or manipulation of data by human interaction. But as we're talking about ways to do this, right, as every company's experience, I think folks are already going through, how do we re-engineer our process? So taking technology like this into consideration as part of that can really be a benefit, and you can really find some efficiencies in it as well. So the benefits of RPA, the first and kind of, I think the easiest one would be the cost efficiency, right? I think we saw over the last decade, there was a big push for companies to offshore certain transactions, and it made sense, right? From a labor perspective, the cost of offshoring certain transactions, there were some savings in that. What we're finding is a lot of those tasks and processes that were being offshored can be handled by bot technology, or at least partially handled by bot technology. And what we're finding there is it's actually cheaper to leverage bot technology than it would be to even offshore. Productivity would be the second benefit. So when we talk about productivity, I think the important thing to note about bots, right? They work around the clock, 24 hours a day. They don't take vacation. They don't get sick. And they have, no sick kids for that matter, right? So, the bot technologies can work 24 hours, 7 days a week. Additionally, the bot vendors, the big vendors out there will tell you the bots are about 4 times faster than a human in processing a transaction. Based on our experience, it's probably been closer to about eight times faster than the human experience, but that would obviously depend upon the process that was being automated. So reliability would be the third benefit that I would highlight from RPA, or bot technology. And what I mean by that is, bots do not make mistakes. The humans that program bots do make mistakes, to be quite clear, but bots themselves don't make mistakes. They only do what they were programmed to do. So they're not going to fat finger a number, right? They're going to take if they're sharing information between, let's say, a banking website or a CRM website and your financial system, they're going to take the value that they were told to take, and they're going to put it in the field that they were told to apply it to in the other system. So, they reduce the errors that humans are prone to, we're prone to make mistakes. So they reduce the errors that can be made by the human. employee satisfaction, and this one I find interesting. So I think a lot of folks still think of bot technology as I use the example of the Terminator, right? It's the machines, they're coming to take our jobs. And the reality is that's not necessarily the case, right? I think studies have found that the tasks that bots are doing are what you would consider mundane, routine tasks that aren't very thought-provoking. So the studies by a number of these, I know Cambridge did one. There was a number of the bot vendors. I think Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Blue Prism, some of the big players out there. They've done studies around this, and they found that the employee experience has improved in conjunction with implementing bot technology. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If I asked everyone to say, hey, if you wanted to focus on more strategic initiatives and you could get rid of one thing, what would it be? Some people are going to say another employee, right? Oh, get rid of that person. That'd be great. But most folks will come back to a task or a process that they do that really doesn't add a lot of value, but consumes a lot of time. And I think what we're finding here is the employees recognize that their best value is when they're using their minds, when they're engaged, and the tasks that bots are generally automating don't tend to be those tasks. And then finally, we're going to, the fifth benefit would be scalability, right? And when I talk about scalability, I'm also going to mention a limitation of a bot here. Scalability, a limitation of bots is they can only process one thing at a time. So with that being said, a bot can process a number of different, or a bot can run a number of different processes in a day. So as an example, at Schneider Downs, we've implemented bot technology internally, and we have about 30 bots that are in production. Not all of which are daily bots. Some are monthly bots, some are on-demand bots, but over half are daily bots. And so that bot can only process one thing at a time, but it can process, 20 different transactions a day. We talk about the capacity of a bot. The capacity of a bot is 24 hours in a day. So at Schneider Downs, the 15 bots that it runs on a daily basis, I think the total consumption time is the bots being used is about 11 hours a day. So we still have 13 hours of capacity. One thing to mention about scalability, and this is where it's the benefit. So knowing that a bot can only process one thing at a time, if there's high volume transactions, so let's say there were millions and millions of transactions that you were using a bot to process, and it couldn't get through it in a day, we can add a second bot. Two bots can be processing the same, or can be running the same process simultaneously, but a bot can only be running one process at a time. So as far as limitations, I think it's important to note where bot technology is bad. And I think the first thing I'll point out is RPA cannot deal with non-routine processes, right? Without artificial intelligence and machine learning components involved. I mentioned before that, it's great for mundane routine tasks that are well defined. If you have a process that the way you handle it every time is different, probably not great for implementing bot technology, right? Just because the maintenance associated with it or the results that it would produce probably aren't going to be worth the cost that it would take to develop and invest in the technology. Second thing is RPA cannot make inefficient processes efficient, right? So let's say you do have a process in place and it's a bad process, right? I mean, it doesn't work manually. The thought that you're going to be able to automate that process and it's going to be better may be a little bit of a misconception, right? I think Bill Gates was quoted as saying, applying technology to an efficient process highlights the value of the technology, and applying technology to an inefficient process only emphasizes that you have a bad process, right? Because you're going to get a lot of bad results. So again, an inefficient process, probably not good for automation. Changes to the environment require bot maintenance, right? So I talked about, hey, going out to a banking website or going out to, let's say you interact with a vendor in some capacity and you have to update information on their website or a customer for that matter. Things that are out of your control, websites in particular. As those websites change, there may be maintenance required to that bot. Just to be clear, that maintenance won't be as significant as the initial development of a bot, because you're probably only changing one little piece of it, right? How it interacts with a particular website or a particular source of data. So with that said, just know that things outside of your control that change frequently may not be good for automation. And frequently, even if it's every month it changes, that doesn't mean it's bad for automation. But if it's something that changes daily, like somebody, a customer changes their website, not the content on their website or the information, but how you interact with the website. If they were changing that on a daily basis, may not be good to automate that process. And then finally, certain forms of multi-factor authentication can be problematic with RPA. Specifically, anything that's optical recognition, if you're scanning your eye, thumbprint recognition, right? Bots don't, in general, they can't replicate that. That's where we would need attended automation. We would need the human to participate in that and then pass it off to the bot. With that being said, things like email notifications or texts, where you get a text code to enter to access a particular site, bots can handle that. So multi-factor is a consideration when thinking about if you should automate a process. So when to use RPA? Again, this is without artificial intelligence or machine learning. When the data is digital, and what I mean by that is, we can tell the bot where to go get information. We can download a report from, we can log into a website, run a report, scrape the data from that report, and put it in a format we want. That's a good use case. However, if we were, let's say we were getting information, folks were emailing us photographs or something like that. That's non-digital data, or it's often referred to as dark data, right? Without an OCR tool or some type of artificial intelligence tool, we don't know how to break that picture down into data, right? So it's important to note that you can use those tools with RPA, but in a hand-in-hand, they can take things that is considered dark data and make it digital. But RPA by itself isn't meant to handle digital or non-digital data. I mentioned processes are rule-based, right? We have a clear defined order of operation of how we want to do things. Good use case for RPA. Tasks are manually intensive or significant volume, right? This really gets to the value of automating a task. When it's a manually intensive task, when it's a high volume task, the bot in production will produce greater return on your investment, right? You're going to save more time, or potentially mitigate more risk or something of that nature. User interface is consistent. That's what we talked about. Wouldn't necessarily want to automate a process that is relying on something outside of your control that changes frequently, right? The structure of it changes, not the information, but the structure of how you access the information. Manual intervention is minimal. Just to clarify here, this isn't a reason not to use RPA, but you have to think about when you use RPA. The bottleneck in attended automation, human interaction in conjunction with bot technology, is the human, right? Bots work 24 hours, 7 days a week. If a bot wants me to authenticate at 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm probably not getting to that until 6 in the morning, right? So when we talk about manual intervention is minimal, maybe it shouldn't be minimal, but maybe it should be manual intervention can be scheduled during, bot technology should be scheduled during when the humans are working, right? The 7 to 6 time frame when it's attended automation. And then finally, and this one's pretty self-evident here, is the RPA has to provide a cost savings, right? There's probably a year-end process that may be a pain, it may take half hour, an hour, that could be automated. But the reality is, does it make sense to automate that process, right? Are you going to get a cost benefit by automating that, particularly if it's something you only do once a year and it's subject to change in the course of 3 years? The cost of developing it may not be worth the benefit provided. So, some things that we're looking for is a lot of times folks will say to us, well, where do we start? What do we automate first? And the reality is, I can't tell you where the value is for your business or your organization, but what I can tell you is, here's what you should be looking at. You should be looking at repetitive tasks, high volume transactions, things that are rule-based, right, that we know how to deal with. And then finally, the one that I'll add here that a lot of people don't think about is prone to human error. And what I mean by that is, if it's a tedious task that just has, that has a lot of volume, and folks tend to make errors because it's really not challenging. It's not thought-provoking, right? A lot of times we'll see folks automate those tasks because they don't make mistakes and they don't get bored and they don't feel like they're not being challenged. And that's kind of what I mean by prone to human error, right? So we can reduce the rework that often happens with associated with human errors by implementing bot technology in some of those processes. Okay, so the next question I always get is, what is the investment, right? Sounds great. What's this going to cost me? And the reality is there's 5 different costs that I would highlight, right? The first is the way the majority of these bot technologies work is they're licensed, they're subscription licensing, right? So that's an annual basis. So you're going to have a license fee. Bot technology, it really varies. Really varies, but like I'll use Automation Anywhere as example, and like the UiPaths of the world, that technology, that licensing can start as low as like $10,000 a year. Microsoft has some options, and their pricing configuration can be a little bit complicated, but can also maybe scale that cost down, or depending upon how many people are using it, could even scale that cost up. But that licensing cost is the easy one. That's the recurring one you can count on to be a certain amount each year. The infrastructure cost, right? So I mentioned this is software. These bot technologies can be deployed on premise. They can be deployed completely in the cloud, or they can be deployed in a hybrid mode, right? Where certain information is stored in the cloud, but certain information is still run behind your firewall. And you have virtual machines working behind your firewall to interact with the applications you have on premise. So there's an infrastructure cost, right? The next thing I would highlight is additional application licenses. And this is kind of what I would consider a hidden cost, right? We talked about bot having ability to log in and download information or search for information or do whatever you might want it to do. The reality is you probably don't want that bot using your credentials. Now, these bot technologies are good both in security as well as the audit trail of kind of what the bot has done. But I think we all know, whether it be in our financial application or whether it be in our banking website, right? They also have ability to track what users have gone in and done. So by licensing, these applications with bot-specific credentials, right? We're going to have the functionality of those applications to say, oh, here's where the bot went in, here's what the bot did, right? We may also not want. I don't necessarily want a bot logging in as Patrick Armknect. That being said, I know that the bots are probably more secure than the human, right? There's no curiosity in a bot. It can only do its intended purpose. It's not going to get in there and start looking around and say, what else can I do? Humans that develop bots could, in theory, do that, but they are very secure. The fourth cost, bot development and maintenance, right? So we've seen, our clients are kind of all over the spectrum as far as how they're supported. We have clients where we're their full source, they outsource all the process review, the identification of processes, the development and the maintenance to us. We also have folks that come in and say, hey, we just want you to help get us started on this journey. We either already have the resources that are capable of doing this, or we're going to make investments in talent to do this, right? So we want to have our own development path. And then we have some that are in the middle. We're going to make investments in resources, but we also want you to support us, whether it be code review or helping us with process or really complicated development that maybe they don't have the experience yet to take on themselves. But there is a cost associated with the development of the bot initially, as well as the maintenance as something changes. I mentioned, the bad use case is that website that changes all the time. But if you think of your average ERP application or financial application, right, there's updates probably once or twice a year, major updates. So they're not really changing that frequently, but there may be something that, you get an update in that, and the way that you used to interface a journal or interface with a journal entry changes, right? And that's where maintenance may come into play. And then finally, the human capital. And again, this is a hidden cost. So regardless of who is doing the development, whether you have in-house resources or outsourced resources, right? They're probably not they're not going to be the process owners. And what I mean is they're not going to know how you transact business and where all the exceptions are and all the rules. So there's time associated with your human capital sharing that information with development resources. So, some best practices for implementing RPA technology. I'm going to say we call it developing an opportunity assessment framework, really. And what that means is laying out the business case for a particular automation. I mentioned Schneider Downs has a bunch of these in place, and the reality is we have many more that have been requested, but it's got to the point where we need to prioritize them based on the best value that they're going to produce for the company, right? So it's not who screams the loudest, although sometimes it works that way. It shouldn't be who screams the loudest. It should be where's the greatest return on our investment. So that's what we're talking about, the opportunity assessment framework. What are the expected benefits of automating a process, and how do we prioritize that development? Second thing we'll say is a best practice is document the as is and to be process, right? So this is important. So let's say you automated a process this year, and 3 years from now it breaks. Let's say it's something interfacing with your banking website. Would you remember how you did that process if you hadn't done it in 3 years? So we want to document the as is state. We also want to make sure we document the to be state with the technology in place, with the automation. And then as that changes, we update that documentation, right? That makes it easy to transition from development resource to another development resource to pick up where we were, as well as for, if we did have to go back to a manual process for a period of time because something broke, we would have kind of the roadmap of how we do that. Prepare a communication plan, internal and external if necessary, right? So to the extent that you're going to be using bot technology with your customers or vendors, you want to make sure that that you're sharing that with them if required or if appropriate. Internally, it kind of gets back to that, hey, are the bots coming to take my jobs, right? And I think, and I'm not going to mislead you, there are some cases where bots could eliminate a position, but the reality is that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing people are using their talent to focus on the strategic initiatives and allow the bots to do the mundane and routine. It's very infrequent that we run into a company, a client, a customer that has all the employees they want, right? It's frequent that we have that we run into companies that have all they can afford, but if you talk to them about what would you do if you could have more resources or add more human capital, and the areas that they focus are never on the bank rec, right? They're never on these mundane tasks. They're on the things that they're going to add value to the organization. Fourth best practice, set goals and monitor your progress, right? And by that we mean, we talk about that opportunity assessment framework where you say, hey, what's the expected return on this bot? What's the value we're going to be? So we want to, after you implement technology, we want to check ourselves, right, and make sure that we're getting that value that we thought we were going to get. To determine a couple things. One, is there a problem in the bot? Is it not working as efficiently as we thought it would? Two, is there something wrong with the way that we're doing our assessments? Are we overvaluing, the return on certain things, or undervaluing in some cases as well? So it's a means of making sure that as we evolve in our digital transformation and RPA journey, that we're able to go back and kind of make sure that we're still hitting the most valuable things or providing the most value to the organization. The fifth kind of best practice is, establishing a governance model, right? And this is the governance model around security, how we're going to secure the bots, how we're going to set them up, and around development. What are our best practices? I mentioned, the best value you get in a bot is when you're using a bot to near capacity, right? When you're almost consuming that 24 hours a day, that's where you're going to see your biggest payback or your biggest return on investment. So we want to make sure, as part of our governance model, that we're taking advantage of all the technologies that we have available to us, right? As an example, if someone has Microsoft SQL and they can run queries in SQL, and the bot could do the same thing as Microsoft SQL. Well, if Microsoft SQL can do it faster, we'll have the bot, launch that query and let Microsoft do it, right? So that we reduce the time that the bot needs to run. It's important to note that to produce the same outcomes, you could develop a bot 1,000 different ways and all get to the same results. Where you're really adding value is when you say, okay, we're producing the results that we want, we're getting the results we need, and we're minimizing the time with the bot. So that's kind of part of that governance model, is making sure you're leveraging all the technology available to you and developing the bots in the most efficient way. And then finally, take a holistic approach to RPA implementation. We will, we meet with, I mentioned we have small clients, we have very large clients, right? I will tell you, personal opinion here, right? Full disclosure. Sometimes the larger clients are not using the technology as well as the smaller clients, and it's because they may be more departmentally focused, or there's an initiative within a department and they're consuming all that bot technology for themselves, right? So they may not be getting the full value out of it. Where that $7 million nonprofit organization I mentioned, right? They're using it for operations, they're using it in finance, they're using it in compliance, they're using it in HR, right? They've identified a number of places to use it. And the reality is, because you are making an investment, a fixed investment, that can scale based on the number of bots that you need. The more places you find to use it, the more value that you're going to get. So some examples of bots that are kind of in use. I mentioned the bank rec one. Again, this presentation is probably geared to more financial folks. But we talk about integrations. We talk about termination of employees. Bots can then terminate access to the different systems that they would be in, or even access to the building, as long as it's done electronically, which I think pretty much everything is now. They can do compliance, right? They can check to see that we have records where we're supposed to have records. We have attachments where we're supposed to have attachments. So they can do that proactive, hey, we're not missing something, or notify someone when we are missing something. We're using it internally, and I know a number of other folks are as well, to do cash receipts processing. So we're taking lockbox and ACH transactions, and we're applying that in our financial system against outstanding invoices, right? So that's kind of an example. Onboarding, website monitoring. I know we make our ACH number available to folks, so that they can pay us. We have bots checking to make sure that information hasn't changed. We have folks in the transportation and logistics industry that are uploading proof of concept, proof of delivery, and proof of delivery documents to their customers, right, to facilitate the payment process and the cash flow process. So we have people doing it for background checks, Medicare fraud checks. Nonprofit I mentioned that's funded by Medicare, by state and federal Medicare agencies. Part of what they have to do from a compliance perspective is make sure that no one is on the Medicare fraud list for those two agencies. So it was a manual process that used to take someone about 12 hours a month. We automated it. It's now taking about an hour and 15 minutes a month, and it's really because that's how long it's taking the website to refresh. So last thing I'll leave you with, and then I'm going to turn it over to Adam, right? You guys know, folks within the business know where the value is, right? If you take what I had kind of mentioned earlier about what are the good use cases for bot technology and think about how it applies to your business, I think you will find some. You'll find some use cases for it, and you'll find how it could maybe benefit your business or organization moving forward. So with that being said, Adam, I am going to let you take control.
Thank you, Patrick. Get my screen sharing going here. Okay. So, they introduced me before, but again, my name is Adam Costa. I'm with the Schneider Downs Technology Advisors Group. My role is solution architect, And what that means is I come in and work with clients to understand their business processes, help them to figure out what's a good process to automate, how to transform or convert that existing process into a process that will make a really good automation. And then my team comes in and we do a lot of implementations to actually build those out, get them rolling for those clients. So out there in the field, really helping people get these implemented. So today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some use cases for RPA. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've actually done. A lot of what Patrick said is high level, so we want to kind of look at some details about processes that are actually out there being automated in the environment today. All right. Okay. First item that we have. So we have a revenue cycle automation, right? So revenue cycle can be quite challenging. This is actually one that we get quite a few people thinking about, right? So you have a lot of payments coming in. You've got check payments. You've got ACH payments. Maybe you have some other forms of things coming in. So someone is processing all those either manually or maybe you've got a little bit of help from your bank to get some of the details out of them. But you've got to apply those to the invoices that they belong to and match them up. And that can be very challenging. People spend quite a bit of time and manual effort trying to match the payments up with the invoices that they've sent out, right? So a lot of people need help with that, right? So you need to save man hours, improve the flow through of all those receipts, right? So what's the approach there? So the key there is going to be identifying key information from the payments and matching those up to the key information you have on those outstanding invoices, right? And the problem there is really the data matching. One challenge is really, having your clients pay you a dollar amount doesn't necessarily match up immediately to an amount on an invoice, right? Because you might have a lot of invoices that the same amount is going to be applied across a lot of customers, right? So you need some way to match those things up in an automated fashion, get some good results. Hopefully, maybe people are putting invoice numbers on those checks, maybe not, right? So you've got to find a way to make that work. In the case where we're actually looking at what ended up happening was they switched to a lockbox mechanism, right? So the bank was pulling in all the key information off the payment data. I was actually keying in the invoice numbers when they were identified on those checks, and then sending that through in a digital format. That way the automation can read all that digital data, match up, get you a pretty high percentage match on the invoices that are coming in or the invoices versus the payments coming in, and get a lot of that done for you. So the real catch here, though, is you don't get 100% match all the time, right? There's always going to be those cases where you need to have a person come in, take a look at that, decide if it's a match or if it's not a match. Maybe there's payments that have no invoice data at all, so someone has to make a determination on what to do. You've also got things like short pays. All those kind of exception stuff that gets handled by a person. So the bot process is really built around get as much matched as possible, match those up, and then send off those things that just need a little bit of intelligence to figure out the extra details on and get those over a person. So how does this really impact the client? Well, they saved about half an FTE's worth of work, right? So it was taking a person a ton of time, right? So that person, not losing their job, but they're just focused on other things. They expanded their role, give them more interesting things to work on than matching checks up to invoices, right? That's not really that fun of a process. Also improve the lockup time from 100 days to 67 days, right? So you could really focus on what invoices were outstanding and what wasn't getting paid. And then you can, follow up with those customers more frequently, see what's going on. Rather than spending so much time just trying to match up checks, you can do actually proactive work to try to make your payments get in quicker. So that was really impact to that one. Next up. So toll road reconciliation, right? So this is an interesting use case that we had with a trucking client of ours, right? So as you know, if you get on the turnpike, now they have all these transponders. Well, with a trucking company, there's also lots of rules in place with the government where they have to also have GPS tracking on the vehicles. Well, with the combination of all that data, they were able to do audits to see, if the toll road was charging them more than they should have. Sometimes those transponders don't ping, or maybe it's out of a battery, so you go through and it tolls by plate, or maybe it's missed altogether, right? And so when a truck misses, the turnpike will see that truck probably either entering or leaving, one way or the other. And when it sees that, it assumes that if it didn't see the other end of that, it's going to take it to the farthest point away and say, well, they must have come from the other side of the state, right? So I'm going to get the maximum toll out of you because I only saw you exiting and I didn't see where you came on. So you just have to pay the maximum amount. And when you're talking about a trucking company with a lot of trucks and they're heavy 6-axle trucks hauling big loads, those numbers add up very quickly, right? The toll for a 6-axle dump truck that's fully loaded can be a couple $100. So in order to prevent those extra charges from being added, they were matching up manually, looking for all those random charges that seemed out of place. And then they would say, okay, I can go to my truck data in this other database that I have, and I can see what route it was running that day. And then I can see the GPS location on that truck during that day and make sure that I knew where it was actually at during that day. Collect that data, put it together, send it back and say, this toll was wrong. I need reimbursed for this amount of money. This is actually the proof that shows that where my truck was. So that process, very manually intensive, right? You've got a lot of data, persons sorting through it, and then they're trying to make decisions just based on skimming through a bunch of documents. So you can potentially miss things, or maybe just spend a lot of time researching things that don't pan out and result in anything. So in order to get that process to be more efficient, they wanted to apply RPA to it, right? And so we're bringing together a bunch of disparate systems that don't talk together, pulling all that data together to do an analysis to figure out were those trucks where they said they were, is the toll appropriate? If not, I want to put together the case to say I need a reimbursement for this amount. So that makes it a pretty good, interesting use case for RPA, right? And the use of GPS data, quite interesting, right? So that you're cross-referencing toll booth locations with the actual truck location to identify where the truck is crossing. Overall, very interesting use case. Saves quite a bit of money, right? So each month there were several $1,000s worth of excess tolls, right? So you can easily justify the cost of putting this in place based on the amount of savings that you're getting out of the bot identifying tolls that were incorrect. And it also reduced the manual effort in producing that amount, right? So it was taking 1 day per month of a person's time to do the analysis on that and build up all the cases. And it reduced that time down to just a few minutes because the bot is so efficient that it could parse through all that data and get it all done in a very, very short amount of time. This next one is actually in Patrick's list, fiduciary fee processing. Right, so I have a client, they service a lot of retirement accounts and they do all of those plan management and so forth. In the fiduciary environment, everything is contract based, right? So depending on the contract that you set up as the fiduciary and as the client of that fiduciary, maybe you are having the fees charged to the company, or perhaps, in smaller companies, sometimes they distribute the fees across the participants in the plan. There's really no set way of doing it. So basically every company has its own unique circumstances on how they want to distribute the fees that the fiduciary is applying to all of the accounts that are part of the plan. All right, and so On the fiduciary side, that's a very manually intensive process, because you have to first off understand all the contract details for each of your clients, and then you've got to apply those to the clients on, I think it's a quarterly basis. They do the fee processing, right? So you got to go through every client, right? If there could be plans with hundreds of participants in them, right? And you've got to apply the rules for withdrawing fees on those individual clients. It might only be a few cents or maybe, dollars on a client, but you've got to calculate that out on each account, apply that fee. And then, you don't want to miss anything, right? So there's a huge amount of overhead that went into ensuring that the fees were appropriately applied, right? So we had a manually intensive review process on top of the manual process to build all those fees, right? So in order to eliminate that, they wanted to apply some bot technology to apply the rules for each client, do all the calculations, and then just present those to the person who could then do, a quick review of the document to make sure everything looked right, rather than having that person do it, go to a second line review, and it was actually going to a third line review because there were so many errors in the actual processing, right? And part of that, the error is that it's very repetitive, very redundant type of work. So people tend to make mistakes. And that's one of the things that bots excel at. They're great at doing rule-based work. They don't get tired. They're going to do and follow every rule to the T every time. And you don't have to worry about going back and doing all these checks to make sure there was no fat fingering or miscalculations, all built in. And once you've done your testing on it, you don't have to worry about those errors occurring. Right, so what were the results of this? Once the automation was applied, it was taking multiple weeks to actually get this done in the manual process. It went from a multi-week process down to about 20 minutes. Eliminated all of the extra review work that was going on. And that was expensive review work because that was happening not at the employee level, but just also at the shareholder level. And the shareholder there is expensive time, right? Because shareholders have a lot going on, so their bill rates are very high. So if you're just applying them to review work in a non-value add way, you're spending a lot of money there. So very successful implementation of processing fees. Next is another trucking example. It's also popped up in Patrick's talk. So we have proof of delivery documentation. So in the trucking industry, one of the key items is that proof of delivery. Most trucking companies actually are set up in a way that I guess they have subsidiaries who are actually the truck drivers, and they need to provide back the signed document, the proof that they actually delivered the work to that client or the end delivery person. And without that proof of delivery, they can't actually bill for the work. So it's really key to the overall business process that the proof of delivery be provided from the end driver back to the billing department and uploaded into the delivery system in order for them to actually bill for the work that they've done. So this is a very manual process at the moment, and it was a huge pain point for the client. The backlog was enormous, right? So they had $500,000 worth of unbilled deliveries, right? And that's basically services that they provided, but they aren't able to bill until they could put those deliveries in place. So you've got a huge amount of WIP that's sitting out there, and it should be billed, and you can't even put them into the collection cycle. And so that's just the bill part. You still might have to wait 30 days to actually collect on it. So huge amount of float there that needs to be taken care of. What was the approach? So many of those documents were actually available via these third-party delivery service websites. And it was really just a matter of going out, checking for them, downloading a copy of it, and then uploading it to the correct delivery system, right? And So to do that, you could easily do that with automation. You can have a bot log into the website, check for the existence of the document, or retrieve it, and then just upload it to the correct location so that it can be billed. So the real key, though, was those pieces that are exceptions where you need to work with a company. Maybe they didn't have it out there. Maybe it's missing for some reason, or there's some other information on the document that's just not there, right? So getting those exceptions into the hands of a person so they can focus on resolving them, that helps a lot. Part of the reason that helps is because once things are missing for so long, they actually go to their uncollectibles and they have to be written off. So they really want to clear that up as soon as possible to save a lot of money. So you don't want to have things written off. And so in the end, it lowered the unbilled services backlog by 85%, right? So they were able to get those things, get the bills out quicker. And it reduced the number of manual process items by 75%, right? So they could get a lot more done without a person having to do anything. That really helps speed things up, get the revenue flowing. And then it allowed them to have greater focus on the things that people needed to do rather than, having a person do those things that weren't really adding value. I mean, they allowed them to generate more revenue, but it wasn't particularly adding value, just getting things done. All right. So this last one, so this is a video that I wanted to show. So I'll preface this with one. This is actually a bank reconciliation process. This is our internal bank reconciliation process. Talk through it just before I started because it's going to go pretty quick. I wanted to be able to show you how these bots actually work. So in this demonstration in our bank rec, we've already downloaded the file from the bank. What you're going to see, the bot is going to take that file, open it up in Excel. It's going to do a bunch of reformatting. There's a bunch of information in that file that we don't need. It's going to clean that all out. Then it's going to log into our financial application, which is Nav. It will go into Nav, open up the correct bank tool, and then it's going to actually use the matching tool that's built into Nav. Patrick had also alluded to this before. If there's built-in functionality, we want to use that, right? So we don't want to rebuild all the matching logic in the bot. Nav has built-in matching logic, so we're just going to try to use that to get a good as match as possible. And then it's going to spit back a report about all the things that it couldn't actually match and send that off to a person so that they can resolve those final issues and close out the reconciliation. So with that said, here we go on the video. All right, so this is the bot interface. So click there on the run. There in the bottom right corner, that's actually the run dialog. We can watch the steps that the bot is performing. Oh, this is not the tool I thought it was. I'm sorry, wrong video. This is actually the security checks. This is where it's going out to a website, downloading or checking the person against the Medicare fraud lists, make sure that they have not performed any Medicare fraud. And it's just doing that really quickly. I'm so sorry that I got the wrong. I thought this was our bank rec video. I made a mistake. Not nearly as interesting as the bank rec, but still, you can kind of see here the bot in action. It looks just like someone we're interacting with it in person, right? This could have been me clicking around on a website, but it's actually the bot performing the actions. See here, it just kind of can repeat through a list and pull up the individual results, save them off to an audit log, and there it goes. So that being said, so we've got these different processes. These use cases are meant to be some food for thought. Every company has their own unique processes and systems. It's one of the features of automation that's unique, right? So you can't say, well, I want a solution for, what should I be using it for? Well, it really depends on where your pain points are as an organization, what applications are you using, how are you doing your business processes? All of that factors into where you should be using RPA in your business, right? You need to sit down and evaluate where your pain points are, where your applications could be streamlined, and find those cases and build the value proposition based on your business and how you perform all the tasks within your business, right? There's no good way to tell you what you should be using RPA for. It really requires you to do that and have that understanding of how your business operates. Only at that point can you really decide what the best place is to move forward with the value proposition. Otherwise, people always want us to just tell them where should I be using it? Well, I can't tell you where. I can guess based on some other experience in different industries. But overall, if you might have a good system for bank reconciliations already, and automation won't provide that much additional value. But based on it being probably the largest request from us, I would say most people don't have a great bank reconciliation process. So it could be a very good use case for you. It just depends on how your bank is structured, how many accounts you have, how much time you're actually spending on it. Right? I think that's really the key takeaway is think about these use cases, but there's probably unique use cases to your business that will add the value of RPA. Okay. Right, so that was the end of my presentation. And I think at this point, we are going to open the floor for questions.
Yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to use the Q&A functionality. I think we explained everything perfectly, Adam.
Maybe I'll ask a unprompted question. What's the typical process that people go through exploring, whether or not RPA is a good fit for them, Patrick?
Yeah, so I think the typical process would be to, from an internal perspective, right? Here's where I would start. I would start with going to process owners, right? Folks who either run a department or know the inner workings of the department, and identifying where people are spending time, right? That's a good thing to start looking at. And then when you identify where people are spending time or where there may be high turnover or things of that nature, kind of talking through the flow of that process to see if it could in fact be automated, or if it is a manual process. The reality is just doing the exercise often points out where you have, even if it's not something that could be automated, will point out where there's maybe issues in a process where, from an efficiency perspective, just going under that lens and reevaluating a process to say, hey, could we be doing this better? So, when we talk about digital transformation, right, that's a big part of it. It has nothing to do with technology. It has to do with process, and is our process right? So that's kind of where people start. Now, I will say that there's a lot of, when people start that process, they start getting ideas, but what they don't know is they say, well, can this process be automated, right? Is this a good fit? And that's where I would say, hey, at that point, you maybe want to identify see that there'd be value in saving time there, and then engage, an RPA provider or someone familiar with it to talk you through it and say, would there be any problems with it? Would you have to change the way you do your process?
Sure. No, and it looks like we just got a question in through the Q&A, and maybe talking a little bit further about how do you work with websites that have logins?
So I have an ethical answer, and I have another. No, okay. Well, so the reality is, if whoever you're working with says, hey, we do not allow bots to log in, then in theory, you're not going to be able to do this. Now, the reality is, the bots can log in, right? And they can log in, and even when you build bots, like if there were a website that says, hey, this thing's just moving too fast for a human, which could happen. They're saying, the way this is interacting with us is too quick, and people will fault into that to say, I think I'm interacting with a bot. You can build in the development pauses, right? You can build pauses into the actions. So if you're not allowed, if you're prohibited from a vendor or customer from using bot technology, ethically you can't do it. If you're not prohibited, and just the way that the website or the portal, whatever you're interacting with, has things built in it to identify bots, you can actually slow bots down to make them believe they are interacting with a human.
I think the other part there is that, so the bot technology, what we use is just Automation Anywhere, as well as the other bot technologies, have built-in credential management systems. So you can store the user IDs and passwords for your bots in a secure location. And then when it gets to those login screens, it can insert those logins and act as, as a user, log into the website and then proceed from there. So they do have that built in where you can log in. Like I think Patrick mentioned this before. If you have like a token-based authentication system where you log in and then it sends you, an SMS to your phone, or you have to use one of those little key things that gives you a password, those are harder to get around. But even cases where they have like the security question, you can store the security questions in that vault as well. And we've done this where, when those security questions pop up every now and then, the bot recognizes the screen and says, oh, okay, I need to put this extra factor in and fill those out and do those steps just like a person would to get into the system and proceed with the next steps. So it's all built into the way that you build the bots.
Yeah, and one of our, just to add to that, because you answered it much more technically than I would have, Adam, but think about when we talk about security and credentialing, oftentimes the people who are creating the credentials for the bot to use are not the people who are doing the development of the bot. So the developers don't know those credentials. They only know that they can call the bot. The folks who are controlling the security can also say, here's exactly where this bot's allowed to go within this website that we're interacting with.
Okay. Looking at the time here, if there's any last questions, we've got another minute or two here. If anybody has anything else they'd like to throw up on the chat here, or
Did you
the
say
Q&A.
throw up or throw out?
Throw out on the
Okay.
chat here.
I have a question if no one's going to ask one. Why develop a bot to interact with the front end as opposed to doing code development with an API and interact with the back end directly?
Great question. So I will tell you, where direct integration exists, where APIs are available, I would say that you want to use an API. It's going to be quicker than the bot technology itself, right? But what we're seeing, and it's becoming less frequent, but the maintenance of that, of who's making APIs available and changes made to those APIs, right? We're eliminating the need. I shouldn't say we're. Bot technology eliminates the need for someone to make an API available. But I would tell you, if there's APIs available between two systems, and you have development resources that are comfortable with building and maintaining that, you would use the API prior to using a bot.
Yeah, I mean, I would also add there that APIs are pretty programmer intensive, and if you're just doing something simple, a business analyst can put together a bot that can pull data off a website or very easily. So you can get things done quickly without having to involve development resources. If you're looking that route, and again, the other part of it, which Patrick emphasized, was there might not be APIs. There's not a lot of APIs out there for everything, right? So there's a few things you have APIs for, and sometimes they make you pay extra to use an API, right? And maybe you don't want to have that cost, so you can accomplish the same thing with bot technology to just go right through the GUI interface without adding too much extra.
Gotcha. Sorry, I'm speaking from a web developer's perspective. So when you said bots can slow down to mimic human interaction, I just threw up.
Well, we've been forced to do that a couple times. We don't like it either because we're like, hey, our results would be so much better. We could highlight this, but yeah, that's the reality, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, then when he says slow down, I mean, it's more of you can build in almost like the try catch thing, or and you know, when you're doing that web development stuff, you still have those try blocks, and you're waiting for a response a lot of times,
Right.
and do those kind of interrupts. That same kind of thing basically exists, right? It's slowing down to make sure the website loaded and you get the interaction, or an image that pops up on the screen before it moves forward, right? Those are the kind of waits. It's not like long drawn out, like I want to wait 2 seconds. It's more like wait until you get a response before.
Oh no, it's just something I have to think about now when I'm thinking about bot detection.
Yeah, we're gonna figure out a way to beat you. I'm just kidding. All right. Well, hey, I know, Patrick, it seems like the questions are answered. And Patrick, I know you have some closing comments. So just to be cognizant of people's time.
Right.
Turn it back over to you.
Yep. Looking at it here, it's almost 1 o'clock. So thanks for spending the lunch hour with us. And looking outside, it's nice and sunny out. So if you have the opportunity, get out of your chair for a few minutes before your next set of meetings and enjoy the sun for a few minutes. But in all seriousness, thank you for attending today. A survey link will be sent out here later after the program. Your feedback is greatly appreciated and very important to us. It's how we develop new programming and future programming. The next program is on March 12th from 2 to 3 p.m. It's virtual as well, and it's developing and managing corporate culture within a remote workforce. So certainly something very timely right now that we're all experiencing. We hope to see you there, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Be well.